How come my school clothes have to be beige?
Because beige is not the color of any known gang.
Right, so instead of being mistaken for a Crip or a Blood, you'd be mistaken for a very large Band-Aid.
Hey, Band-Aids are ouchless. Oh, excuse me, there's a line.
Yeah, I just got a couple things.
Well, I can see that, but it's not really based on quantity of items. It's more of a we were here before you kind of deal.
You gonna make a thing out of this?
There's no thing, just playing by the rules, and wouldn't it be nice if everybody did the same?
Hang on to this, Slick. Now, you wanna explain those rules again, Jughead?
Alright, so playing by the rules, but which rules, Alan Jerome Harper? Do you mean the first come, first serve, also known as first in, first out, or FIFO rule? Now, here's another question. Why is that rule the rule? Why not having another rule like number of items, right? Because here the question is, if we want to assess a process performance, we can assess it by different means, and the order, the sequence that we decide for is going to have an effect on that performance. So having a look at this picture, now imagine this is a top view of that supermarket, and imagine, let us assume that this what is this, yellow orange blocks represents the servers or the cashiers. And now let us also imagine that these triangles, circles, and squares represent our customers. So depending on the order that we define on how these customers are served, we can assess the performance of the whole system by means of speed, and speed can be the individual speed, the time elapsed, the lead time it takes on average for a customer, or it can also be the average time for the complete set of customers to be served. There are more KPIs or performance metrics. For instance, the average number of inventory or WIP. In this case would be not items, but people. We can also measure by the level of utilization of these cashiers. And this is just an example of how we can assess performance. So coming back to this fascinating supermarket case with the 2.5-man show, the question rises, what is the best arrangement? Because an arrangement of the sequence of how people is going to be served is definitely going to have an effect on the customer satisfaction. So what you see here is just an example. This is a multiple lines serving example, but we can also have the following. Maybe you have experienced that, I'm sure you have, in which you have a single line in which customers arrive and they all have to wait until they are served, and they just approach to that server that is available. You might recall this example from in the airline industry when you are lining for a counter for a check-in or buying maybe a train ticket. Why is the reason behind this type of arrangement? It has to do a lot with the psychological effect. The psychological effect of fairness. People here, they feel that regardless the time they take, they are treated fair because it's a first come, first serve. Okay, so the arrangement or the sequence is just a little element of a bigger problem, and these are the so-called waiting line problems, in which number one, a customer population is waiting to be served by means of a service system. Now, it is within this service system that we have some variables like the waiting line. So here we have a variable of the average arrival rate of people. You might remember cases in which finally you decide to go for that delicious cheeseburger at McDonald's, and it is in that precise moment that there is a huge line, right? So suddenly out of the blue, a lot of people just came. So you have these kind of patterns, and that is number two, that you have a lot of variables there like the arrival rate. We have the priority rule, which is how items, jobs, people are going to be served based on some priorities, on some rules. And eventually we have another element that plays a role, which is really the service facility, which is, we can express it as the serving rate. Yeah, how many customers on average can be served. That is a little bit of the capacity of the system. So as you can see, that is a big helicopter view, the big picture of this problem. But we're not going to deal with all these 1, 2, 3, and 4 items. We're just going to go to the priority rule. And I'm going to show you in this lesson the effects, believe it or not, that just pure arrangement can create even on the capacity of this system, and hence on creating or enhancing customer satisfaction. All right, so this is module 7, and this is about jobs, scheduling, and sequencing. So here, 2 magic words, I will clarify them as well. So in case you have a Krajewski book, you might find this topic on chapter 10. If you don't have this book, no worries. Just get yourself any kind of operations management book, and for sure you're going to have these topics there. If these topics are not included in that book, hey, you know what? Get rid of that book, because that is for sure not a good one. I mean, this is just such a basic topic. It's mandatory to be there. So we're going to accomplish 3 goals. Number 1, first of all, appreciate the nature of scheduling problems. So I just showed you here an example. We all have experienced that. Maybe we're not aware of the impact that rules like first come, first serve create on our experience. I'm going to show you also some key performance measures as to assess what is the best sequence. Here we see a lot of acronyms: FIFO, LIFO, EDD, SOT, LOT, period. At this point. So I can imagine that you might remember FIFO and LIFO, but these 3 might sound a little bit alien to you perhaps. So no worries, you will understand what it means just in some minutes. And finally, number 3, explain the importance of scheduling to the performance of the firm. All right, so let us start with the basic definitions. So we have here scheduling and sequencing. So what is the difference? The differences. So scheduling is about determining the times for each activity, whereas sequencing is about the order. So scheduling is about the time, so when to do it, and the sequence is which one first. Yeah. And just to show you, to illustrate this example, here on the bottom we have a bus, a city bus that has to reach several bus stops within the city of London. And here the question remains, what should be the order for this bus to visit these bus stops, and what should be there for the scheduling? So these 2 are embedded. So because if you decide to visit or to go on one route, right, like something like this, rather than in a different order, well, that will have an immediate impact on the scheduling. So sequencing and scheduling are very heavy topics. Actually, they fall into a discipline called operations research, which is kind of a mixture of operations management with computer science. So it's about algorithms that can create the optimal arrangement with regards to this scheduling and sequencing. So these are real examples that we all have experienced. So as you can see, we have many types of scheduling operations. We can cluster them in 3. We can say we have operations scheduling. We also have demand scheduling and workforce scheduling. So operations scheduling, well, deals with assigning jobs. Remember, jobs are things to be manufactured. Yeah, this is the term that we normally use, jobs, for specified time periods. Demand scheduling is about assigning customers for a particular time for order fulfillment. An example just popped up into my mind. I was just thinking about that theme park in the Netherlands, but now the name is gone of that park. It doesn't matter. That allows customer to reserve a particular place before going to the roller coaster or to a game. Did I explain that right? Basically, what it means is that you have an app on your phone, and then you're able to reserve a seat so that you don't have to be waiting in that line. You just go at that time, and this is an example of demand scheduling. Okay, now the name came to my mind. It's called Efteling. Efteling is a famous amusement park in the Netherlands. Efteling was playing with that technology. We also have workforce scheduling. Workforce scheduling is about, well, when employees work. Picture a restaurant. So you have a fleet of people that some they work every day, some they just work 3 days a week, etc., etc. And then every week the restaurant manager has to create a schedule, like a picture, like a Gantt chart that shows who is going to work which days and within which time. So this is workforce scheduling. There are methods for that, and there are even softwares for that can help you, that can assist that manager. So different types of scheduling. We're going to be concerned on number 1, but I just wanted to show you that the other two so that you have a bigger picture. And in fact, here are just examples for different types of organizations and the type of decisions or the items that have to be scheduled. So we have hospitals, we have universities, factories, restaurants, airlines. So if we're talking about hospitals, well, we have to schedule the rooms, the patient admissions, the doctors, because these are very expensive resources. You want to keep them always active, huh? You don't want that they're just having cigarette breaks outside in the hospital, just waiting to be used. No, you want them to be always busy. Picture scissor cuts in hospitals, very common case in Latin America, for instance. So you can really schedule those jobs, and then you can keep those doctors busy all the time, just delivering babies one after the other, just like an assembly line factory. We also have universities, and picture Fontis, and there is a person, by the way, that creates our schedules, because she needs, and it's a she, and it's really a hero, this person. It's really, I mean, her computer has like 3 monitors, just picture that. So she needs to combine all these constraints of rooms, teachers, cohorts of students, and create our schedules. And you know, the worst part is that nobody's happy with the result, even though she really optimizes as much as possible. So she's doing all these classrooms, the students and instructor schedules, etc. Factories, production of goods, purchases of materials, workers. Restaurants, as I explained, chef, waiters, entertainers, etc. An airline, well, the maintenance of the aircraft, departure timetables, crews, catering, gates, and ticketing personnel. Now, in airline, one of the most important KPIs is the lead time. The plane is actually on the ground. So you want to minimize that time. Otherwise, it becomes really expensive. So yeah, they have to be very optimal in terms of how they schedule all these resources. So these are just a list of examples so that you can get an idea of what we're talking about. We are going to concentrate here on factory. Okay, and once again, I hope you still remember this picture, and this picture is trying to illustrate how all the different decisions involved in a factory, in an organization, are somehow interlinked. So in terms of time, we have the long range type of decisions. This happens every 5-10 years. We also have the medium range, picture every year, for instance, every quarter. And then we have the short range. These are decisions that should occur every week, every day, every hour sometimes. And you see here, okay, some nice pictures of cars that are crashing and everything. But what matters is what you see here in the center, because these blocks represent processes, right? So right on top, long range, we have product decisions. Like, I don't know, like Steve Jobs thinking, hey, here at Apple Computer, I'm just thinking about going into the mobile business. Wouldn't that be a good idea to launch a phone? Do we have the know-how, the resources, etc.? That happens here, right? Once that decision is taken, then the question comes, do we have the capacity to make that happen? Do we have the facilities? Do we need to outsource, like what they actually do with Foxconn in China? that happens here. And we have in the center, we have the aggregate plan of production, because now we are in the medium range, and this is really where the action happens. So if we're talking about phones or we're talking about any item, here is the initial plan in which, by means of demand forecast, capacity, inventory on hand, and external capacity, we're going to decide how much and when is going to be produced. So we start on a very high level, that is why it's called aggregate, and later on we're going to break it into its details. And as you might remember, nowadays companies rely on computer systems, information systems like SAP, for example, Oracle, and such. And these are called the material resource planning systems. Material resource planning systems will be linked. Sometimes they as an output, they will deliver you the so-called work schedules. Work schedules, well, as the name says it, is about which item is going to be manufactured when and in which order. So we are in a very low level, and this is where we are located when we are talking about the sequences, when deciding this order. These are the type of decisions that happens here. So just again, here's a scheduling flow. You can see with what I just illustrated, we have a capacity plan for the facilities, and eventually you have the aggregate planning. So decisions are taken. This is our bike production. Now we know that on the first month there will be 800 bicycles. On the second month, 850. We don't show which type of models, mountain bikes, road bikes. It's just on an aggregate production. But of course, eventually we're going to create the master schedule. So now we go really into the details of the SKUs, which items or which finished goods are going to be produced and when. So you see from here to here there is a disaggregation. Think about resource planning again, doing this, and eventually we really now have the people doing that specific job at a specific place, following a specific order. So we are really here. This is about the job sequencing and dispatching, right? Okay, so going back to the environment of the factory, very often factories are not just assembly lines, but they are job shops. So what is a job shop? I don't know if you still remember that from many years ago. I want to believe that you still remember that, but let us just, for the fun of it, let's just refresh what a job shop is. So a job shop is an environment that is designed for low to medium volume production. Yeah, like a furniture store, you're producing tables and chairs and sofas perhaps. It utilizes job or batch processes. So you have a batch, a limited number of items that have to be produced, maybe for a client in particular. And there are a lot of challenges here, because what you see here is the top view of that job shop, in which raw materials are being transformed into finished goods. But you also see here some sort of spaghetti flow, spaghetti kind of diagram, because these particular materials rely on the use of resources which are shared. You know, these resources are not unique for a particular product type. They are also used for other products. That's the reason why you see here circles on different colors. And the question is, which from all these colors are we going to prioritize? And how can we define what is the best? So as we have seen before, we can assess the performance by means of speed, if that is what matters. But maybe what matters is the average inventory, the WIP, that we have in the system, because I don't know, maybe these are very expensive items. We don't want to keep them just there. We want to flow them rapidly in the system. We can also measure by level of tardiness. How late on average are we going to meet our customer request? Again, this could be a factory fulfilling orders coming from different customers, requesting different type of products with different volumes. And it's always a question of which from these orders are you going to give priority? Is it just going to be like a first come first serve, like Alan Harper tried to illustrate this gentleman at the beginning of this material? Well, that's what we're going to see. So that is the question. How can or what could that determine the sequence? So we have batches of jobs to be processed, and we have a common resource, and now we have to evaluate what should be the order. Is it going to be A, B, C, D, E? Or is it going to be backwards? Or is it going to be like C, B, A, E, D? Okay, so whatever order we go for is going to have an effect on this performance. Okay, so here, these are the rules, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because at least we can rely on the following. Some of these you're familiar with, but I'm just going to quickly explain them. So number one is called the due date. Also, well, the acronym is DD, or also known as earliest due date, right? So what is earliest due date? You give priority to that job that needs to be delivered first. Yeah, it doesn't mean that that order arrived first. No, it's just the deadline. It's about the deadline. We also have LIFO, last in, first out. Like, this is an elevator, is a LIFO, the last in is the first that is able to go out. We also have the opposite, the first in, first out, that creates that fairness in some environments, like in the supermarket. We also have the longest operation time first. So that operation that is going to take the longest, we start with that first. Or we can go the opposite, shortest operation time first. So, hey, this takes such a little time, let's just get it done. So sometimes, for example, I am at home, and then it is the weekend, and then, I'm always imagining, what am I going to do? Am I going to go for a run, maybe some mountain biking, and so on? And I'm drinking my coffee as all these nice images comes to my head, until somebody at home arrives, and guess who? Arrives with a to-do list, and this to-do list involves, I don't know, cutting the grass, repairing the curtain, hanging a frame, installing a lamp, etc. And I'm like, oh damn. And then comes the question, which of these jobs will I start doing first? And normally I want to go for number 5. That one that is very fast, I start first. So because I want to have this feeling that I am advancing, you see? But some people might prefer to go for the toughest job first. So I guess we need to use some KPIs as to assess what is the best performance. Okay, so these are the KPIs, performance measures, and here we just have 3, but there are more. Let me explain the number 1. It's called flow time, also known as job flow. And it is the time a job spends in the service or manufacturing system. So just keep in mind that when a job needs to be processed, it's not just the processing time that matters, but it's also the queuing time, the waiting time, right? Like, I don't know, maybe you want to have a revision of your exam, right? And then there is a teacher in his office, but there are also 20 other people there. And some people have tiny questions. Maybe you just have a tiny question, a small, quick question. And some people really have long questions. So it's not just how long it will take your question to be answered. It's also the time that you have to wait for you to be served. So this total time is the time in the process. And we can come up with an average for all these items. And that is a good metric. There is also the past due or tardiness, which is the amount of time by which a job missed its due date. So very often, maybe you have to deliver different reports to different teachers. You have different deadlines, right? So now, how can you decide which report to do first? Now, depending on which order you go for, you might meet or not those deadlines. So number 2, tardiness, we can measure that as an average. Number 3 is about the make span, which is the total amount of time required to complete a group of jobs. The time of the completion of the last job and this minus the starting time of the first job. That is a make span. Here, let us stop for a second. Make span is not the same as flow time. Flow time deals with the time of that particular job, yeah? Whereas make span is the total amount for the complete group of jobs. Yeah, so This will come very clear with the examples that I will show you, but it's just for you not to get confused. We have 4 and 5. We have the total inventory level. So you can measure the effectiveness of the schedules by means of how much WIP we have on average in the system always. And of course we have the utilization, which is a term that you might remember from capacity management, which tells us how intensive we're using our resources. It could be a cashier, it could be a classroom, a teacher, a doctor, etc. And is expressed as percentage. Now, depending on the business objective, you might give priority to different variables. So if you're going for dependability, flexibility, then meeting due dates. Dependability is about reliability. It's about the consistency for delivering always good results. So you give particular emphasis to due dates, to meeting due dates. What could be important in business? I don't know. Some businesses for sure, they will lose a lot of faith from their customers if they don't meet their deadlines. Maybe even Amazon gives priority to this, to the due date. Speed is about minimizing flow time. Yeah, so if your goal is speed, then you go for flow time, to minimize flow time. Now here, minimizing flow time doesn't mean that you will meet all the deadlines, right? Because here you're thinking as the bulk, as the complete batch of products. You want to minimize this flow time. We also might want to minimize cost by minimizing work in progress, because who knows, maybe those items are too expensive just to keep them there. We want to rotate them quickly, so we keep an eye on this. Or we also keep an eye on the idle time of the work centers, because we also want to minimize that cost. Okay, so here comes so that is kind of like the theory, and we're going to apply that theory to a particular simple example. And this is an example that I created inspired by you students. So let me read it. It's almost the end of the semester and you still have 5 reports to submit before final exams. And the question comes, which report to start first? Let's assume that for each report, you know the respective due dates, an estimated process time. So you have an idea, maybe because of the number of pages or the number of words that the reports have contained or must contain. You have an idea of how extensive these reports are. So you give your reports the codes of A to E as soon as they are given to you until you have them all. So here, let us assume that this A, B, C, D, E is the sequence. This is the order in which these reports arrive to your hands or your inbox. This column represents the process time, where, I don't know, this report C, which is demand 6 days, could be, I don't know, GM1, could that be? And maybe report E with just 1 day is some kind of reflection report of something for your journey coach, perhaps. And then you of course have due dates. Okay, so let us follow the original sequence. And let's see what happens in terms of performance. So we're going to follow this, and let us assume that you will start with 1 and then you will continue to the next until you're done with the first. So that's kind of the convention that we're going to follow. Okay, so we have here now a table full of numbers, but let me explain what this means. So this is FIFO, first in, first out, and that's the sequence that we are following. That's why this column is in yellow. So we have here process times in days that was given to us, and we have starting time, finish time, due date, lateness, earliness. And then here we have some KPIs: the total time in process, the average time, the make span, the total lateness, the average from the total. So let me explain now what is happening inside of this table. Okay, so we start with job A. Job A, or report A, requires 5 days to be completed. So we're going to start on day 0. This is pure convention. You can call it day 1, day, I don't know, 10.5, whatever convention you decide for, then you have to make sure you stick to that. So in this case, we stick to the convention of day 0, and we start on day 0, and we're going to be done on day 5. And why are we going to be done on day 5? Think about it. That's right, because of this number, it takes 5 days. So we are done on day 5. The due date is on day 6. So hey, great, because we have 0 days late and we have actually 1 day earliness. So we finish in 1 day before. So once we're done with sequence A, we move to item B. Now item B takes 3 days. So we're going to start on the same day. Again, it's just a convention. You can say I start the next day, okay, but then you stick to that convention. So we're going to start here on day 5. 5 plus the 3 is 8. So we're going to be done on day 8. So what is happening now when you compare to the due date? You are late. That's right. You're late by 3 days. Okay, that's the reason why you have a 3. We continue, and then it becomes really just mechanical. So we started again on day 8. It takes 6 days. That's GM1. You're done on 14. Hey, the due date was on on the date 8. So you're 6 days late. Not so good. Then finally we go to D. It takes 2 days. And then E, it takes only 1 day. And we are very late because even though it's just 1 day, the due date was on day 3 and we are done on day 7 because we did all these jobs or reports before. So we are 14 days late. Okay, so this is what happened with this arrangement. So now let's measure the performance of the arrangement. So what is the total time in the process or the job flow? Here we have a 60. So where does that 60 come from? Well, if you add all these numbers, these finish times, that is the total number of days required to process, to flow all these items, right? So if this is a total number of, so this total time in the process involves both the processing time and the queuing time. Yeah, that's a 60. So once again, while you were creating report A, and that takes 5 days, report B, report C, report D, and report E were all waiting, sort of speak, 5 days. 5 days, this is waiting time. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second, what do you mean waiting? I mean, these reports don't even exist. You have a point there, but now picture that these are tangible raw materials, yeah? And then you have all these raw materials waiting on top of a pallet, all these 5 days. You're done with item or job A, and you move to job B, right? So now B needs 3 days, so which is basically 5 plus 3. That's why you have 8. 5 of waiting, 3 of processing. That's this 8. You see that? Now, while you are processing job B, job C, job D, and job E, they are all waiting 3 days. Now, they waited 3 days from the processing time of B, and they also waited already the 5 days because you were processing A. So now picture, so that item E is been waiting like a lot of time. It's been waiting a lot of time, and although it only takes 1 day, eventually is done on day 17. So these 60 days include the processing time and the waiting time. That's why I say 60. The make span is the total number of days, 70, that you require to process all these. So from the beginning until the end, it doesn't differentiate or account into waiting and processing time. Is just when did you start it and when are you done with the complete set. And this is an interesting variable because as we're going to see later, in the moment we rearrange this sequence, we're going to have an effect on the 60, but the 17 will remain because we follow the convention that we can only operate or process one item at once. You cannot do things in parallel. If you manage to do things in parallel, then you will improve your make span. So in the context of reports, I don't know, you have your girlfriend or boyfriend doing the reports also for you, and then you just go in parallel. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Total time in the process involves, I'm going to repeat it again, processing time plus waiting time. So in the moment you're processing one item, the other items, the other jobs are waiting that same amount of time. And when you add all these times together, you end up with this 60. That is the job flow. Now let's move to total lateness. So total lateness, so here, these are the number of days in which we were late because we couldn't meet these deadlines. So if we add them all up, we end up with 32. And if we divide them by 5, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs, we have on average 6.4 days of delayed. Earliness, well, it's just 1 day. We were too early and average 0.2. Here, let's just pause for a second. In this context of reports, it's great that you finish beforehand, no? I mean, I think it gives you a nice feeling, you have a buffer time, but in some other environments might not be the case. Because picture a factory. If you finish items before you were supposed to finish them, that means that those items have to wait somewhere in this place, in a warehouse perhaps. And because they're waiting, they consume also resources. They can also get damaged. So you don't want to finish too early, you see? So you want to finish just in time or very close to the time the optimal time that it was planned. Okay, so once again, this is FIFO arrangement for these reports. Let's change this sequence. And now we go into earliest due dates. And once again, we have the same table. But now you notice that the letters are arranged differently. So now we have, in the beginning, we have E, B, A, D, and C. And the reason for this sequence is because of what you see here on this yellow column. So you see due date, day 3, due date the 5th day, the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So now we gave priority to this variable. So we start with the same procedure as before. So process time 1 day for E, so we start on day 0, finish time 1, and then 1, then plus 3 for processing time, that will be a 4, then plus the 5, 9, etc., etc. So you notice we are still done on day 17, that is the same make span as before, but have a closer look at the total job flow. So the total job flow, if you still remember, I hope, otherwise rewind this video, it used to be 60 when we work on FIFO. Now we drop it to 42. And here's the question. If you have two variables playing a role, which are processing time and waiting time, which from these two variables did you actually manipulate or optimize? It's definitely not the processing time. So processing time remained the same. That means that by creating a different sequence, we eliminated a lot of waiting time. So we managed to dispatch goods rapidly. So in the same way, we can see here we have a total lateness of 16 and the average of 3.2, which is divided by 5. What was the number we had before? Let me just go back to that slide because now I forgot it also. It used to be 32. And we drop it already in half. Hey, isn't that great? Same resources, same jobs to be done, same processing time, yet completely different performance. And we didn't apply like sophisticated rocket kind of mathematics here. We just rearrange the order by a different priority. It's just to show you the effect or the power of sequencing a job. And okay, so here's an example of a factory, but you can apply that to your real life perhaps whenever you're dealing with jobs, with tasks to be done. Okay, so now normally we will do this in class, but why not? You can also do it at home. I know that some of you actually do this, so go for it. Do LIFO, SOT, short operating time first and long operating time first, and let's compare this flow time and tardiness. Flow time, again, is the total time in the process. Let's compare the results. Okay, so these are the results that I got, and you see here the sequences, and you can see their performance. And you can see the huge contrast among them. So you can see how FIFO, which is the one that gives the feeling of fairness whenever you're dealing with customers in an environment of a B2C, might not be the best performer. In fact, it's one of the ones that takes the longest to flow all these jobs. The fastest is short operating time with a 38 flow time, even better than the early due date that we previously performed. We also see a drop in the tardiness by 1 day. So overall, SOT in this particular case seems to be the one that wins, at least in terms of flow time and in terms of tardiness. Under the assumption that this is what you need for your company, then you go for an SOT. Okay, so we have seen flow time, and calculating the average WIP is basically a formula, but here I'm just using these visuals. These visuals I just made with Excel, I confess that. And I'm using, what you see in these visuals, which I will explain them in detail, are Gantt charts, and are Gantt charts for the different arrangements, the different priorities, yeah? So these are our jobs, and now we have A, B, C, D, and E, and we can see now the number of days expressed as some kind of Lego bricks, as A is 5 days, B 3 days, E is just 1 day, and this could be GM1 with the 6 days, you know, the monster report. And here we have our arrangements. We have flow time calculation and average flow time. We have some numbers, but let me just show you where these numbers come from. So what you see here is a Gantt chart, and here we have the timeline, we have the days, and these are the 17 days. This is the make span. So remember that 17, that's here. You notice that all of them, regardless of the arrangement, the order that you follow, they all have 17. But you also notice the following. These bars in colors represent processing time, as you can read here. But these bars in white, these are the waiting time, the queuing time. So as I explained you before, and sorry if I'm repeating myself, but just to make it very clear to everybody, while you were processing job A, the rest of the items were waiting. So you see 1 day waiting, another day waiting, and that's why we have one day waiting, and that will be B. That will all these days waiting for C, which is 5 plus 3, 8 days. And not to mention job E, that basically only takes 1 day to process, but it needs to wait all these 16 days. So you see, this is the arrangement of FIFO. Let's go to the winner. The winner was short operating time first. Now that is activity E. So you are done with activity E, and you can move immediately to activity D. And activity D only waited 1 day, right? And by the time you reach to the third job, which is activity B, you only have 3 days of waiting, and you could immediately start processing, and the same happens for the rest. So although you complete all your jobs in 17 days, you start dispatching them faster, which means that they need to wait less, and this is what these numbers express, and these are the numbers that we previously calculated. So what is the average flow time? Is nothing but the average. We just take these numbers and divide by 5. So we can measure it in either that way or that way. That is the average. Okay, so what is with WIP? WIP, or inventory, work in progress, is the sum of the flow times divided by the make span. Make span is the 17 days. It's the same for everybody. And the flow times is the 60. So 60 divided by 17 should lead you to 3.53. That is the average WIP. And one way that to visualize that would be as if, on day one. So picture that we are all in day one. On day one, we have as an inventory level, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 jobs. One job is being being processed, the other jobs are waiting. That's on day 1. And the same looks, on day 1, everything looks the same for everybody. But when we go to day, what would be 12? On day 12, we have, on average, we have on inventory, by following FIFO, we have 1, 2, and 3 items. 1 item that is under processing, and 2 that are waiting, so 3. But if we go to LIFO, we only have 2 items as inventory. 1 that is under process, and 1 that is waiting. And when you go to early due date, or SOT, we only have 1 item on inventory. You see? So that is just the one that is being under process. So the average WIP is kind of a, if you take into account all these days and you have inventories and these bars that I'm here illustrating with my pointer, these are like bars of stock. If we come up with an average and we draw a line, that line would be this average WIP. So here on FIFO we will have 1, 2, 3.5, that will be this line. That line represents the average. But here we have a drop of 2.24, which is somewhere here. So average WIP is nothing but a formula, but what matters is what it means. It tells you on average, within all these 17 days, how much inventory are you keeping in order to process everything. So you can see the efficiency. This is about efficiency, and it matters when your goal is to minimize cost, right? Because here you incur in less cost as when you're having items that are waiting, especially when they're very expensive. Okay, so once again, this is the other KPI. This is inventory. Okay, so what I have now are normally exercises to be done during class. So I really suggest that you do this on your own. So I'm just going to go through them kind of quickly because they are really self-explanatory, and I think you really get them as you do them. And it's really not rocket science. So rocket science, that's the second time I say that term. It will be the last, I promise. Okay, so here we have a consulting company that has 5 jobs in its backlog. And we're going to schedule by 3 priorities: FIFO, short operating time, early due date rules. Yeah, and we're going to calculate average days past due date and flow time. So these are our KPIs. And let's choose the best option by means of average flow time. So this is our data. So we have customer A, B, C until E. Here we have time since order arrive. So we have 15, 12, 5, 10, and 0. We have processing time, and we have the due dates. Now, let us stop for a second here, because this column, we have never seen it before. We have seen always customer or orders. We have the processing time and due date. So what does that really mean? Time since order arrive. And we have 15, 12. This is time, you can see it. This is the backlog. If today is day 0, customer A order arrived 15 days ago. As if I would say minus 15, although it makes no sense to use a minus in a timeline. But 15 days. 15 days that order A has been waiting. Yeah? So 15 days waiting already before day 0. 12 days waiting before day 0. 5, 10. And order E just arrived today. So why is that relevant? Because if you remember job flow or the flow time, the formula is the total processing time plus waiting time. And we kind of we all started on day 0, and all these orders arrive kind of on that day 0. Yeah. Here it's a little bit different because orders arrive before. So we need to add these numbers as waiting time. So okay, so this is the solution for FIFO. And I hope this becomes clear. It's very simple, but sometimes people get confused. Okay, so we're going to follow FIFO. That means this order. A, B. No, wait a second. Sometimes people get confused. I also got confused here. Sorry, this is FIFO. And FIFO states that customer A should be the first one in the sequence because that order arrived earliest. 15 days ago. Here, you notice, now I remember that is A, B, but look, it's not A, B, C, D, and E. It's A, B, D, C, and E. And the reason why this order change has to do with these arrivals. It turns out that customer D's order arrived 10 days before. And customer C's order arrived 5 days ago. So you see, FIFO here is defined by the day the orders arrive. So this one is very old. So hey, first come, first serve, and then this one, etc., etc. These are the due dates. These are the processing time. So let us start. We start on day 0. We are done on day 25 because it takes 25 days. Okay. Now here, FT stands for flow time. Now wait a second. What do you mean 40? Where does that 40 come from? Well, 25 days of processing plus the 15 days that this order was waiting. So it took 40 days for this customer A's order to flow. 15 days waiting plus the 25 of processing. Okay. Tardiness 0 because the due date is on day 29th and we are done on day 25th. Okay. So now let us move on. We go to order B. Now we start on the day 25th because that's when we were done, and we just add or sum the processing time, and that is 16 days. So 25 plus 16, that is 41. But here once again we have a flow time of 53. So what is happening here? Because order B had to wait first for the 25 days of process. That's why here we start on day 25. It also had to wait 12 days because it arrived in the past. And then, so that is waiting, and processing. When we add these numbers, that is 53. Okay, so you can simply go for 41 plus 12, that is the waiting time, that will also be 53. You see? So, normally I do a visual in the whiteboard, and I don't have it here, but maybe you can do it at home. So now create a Gantt chart, and you see you define the line of day 0 and make bars to the past, so that you can have the 15, the 12, the 10, the 5, and then you can visualize all the length of these bars, and that is the flow time. Okay, so we continue on day 41 plus 10, that is 51, plus the 10 of waiting, that will be the 61. So it took 61 days for that order, and it took 70. So we just continue with the same procedure: 51 plus 14, 65 plus 5, 70, and finally we on this day 65th we process that order, and we are done on 77. And here that order arrived on day 0 today, so we don't need to add any kind of additional waiting time. And these are the flow times. Yeah, so if we add these numbers up and come up with an average, we divide everything by 5, we have 60.2. Here, tardiness, very simple. We just compare the dates in which we were done, we were finished, and we contrast those dates with the due dates. So here we have here something interesting, because we were supposed to be done on day 27th and we were done on day 41, so we had 14 days delay. Here we only have 3 days, just a little bit delay, and for the next 2 we were right on time. Yeah, we finished on 65, 77, and they were supposed to be delivered on these dates. So this is on average, so we just divide everything, that's 3.4, and this is the performance for FIFO. Once again, this will be the performance for short operating time rule. We have a complete different sequence now, because what is the priority? The processing time. So 10, 12, 14, 16, 25. So we start with the duties that are very fast, very easy to dispatch. So it takes only that, and we just left the item order A for the very, very last. And we perform in the similar way our calculation, always adding up the waiting times that they had these orders because they arrived before. And look, here we have already a completely different scenario. We drop our flow time to 47.8. Let me just go back very quickly. Here on FIFO, it used to be 60.2, now we have 47.8. What about tardiness? Well, with SOT we have 14 days. And with FIFO we had 3.4. So here we have a dilemma. So what is more important? Do you want to be reliable with your customer? Then go for FIFO. FIFO wins because on average you basically meet most of the goals of deadlines. It's more expensive because you have more items in the pipeline, in the system. But SOT is faster, it has less items, but there is a price, and the price is that the customer pays for that. So we don't meet a lot of these deadlines. Finally, early due date is kind of in the middle, with 58.4 and 3 days of tardiness. So yeah, both measures, SOT, EDD outperforms FIFO. We can say that. I would say because these are the variables that matters, the flow time, then FIFO is a loser. But if it's about reliability, in which tardiness matters, then FIFO is a winner. So you see, it really depends on what you're looking for. All right. So having said that, so here just a final remark. However, the solution found in the previous example still has the best average flow time. That is SOT, short operating time first. So summary. This is the final part. Scheduling is the allocation of resources over a period of time to accomplish a specific set of tasks. So it's about defining the order. Gantt charts are very useful. I use them a lot because I'm a very visual person, and I can get easily confused when I just see letters and numbers. I need to see a picture. So if you have the same kind of brain like me, then I suggest you do a Gantt chart. Because it clarifies a lot of what is going on. No approach to scheduling is best for all situations. Performance measures can be used to select the most adequate one. Once again, it's not just about flow time, it could also be tardiness, it could be earliness. To be earlier is not always the best case in some situations. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Minimizing cost, maximizing customer experience. So you have always like trade-offs and you have to make a decision. Now, the advantage of this is that before you engage into the activity, you can simulate. Even you as a student, you have different reports to be done. You can do a quick simulation of, hey, which task, which report should I start first by means of these rules. So why not applying these rules on real life? Okay, so having said that, that was the last slide for today. Yeah, so yeah, thanks a lot for your attention and hope to see you when I see you. Bye bye.